Well, hey, everybody, we are so glad you are here. This is Lisa Nearing from True North Homeschool Academy, and I'm here with Kat Garcia, who is one of our Spanish teachers, and we are going to talk to you about foreign language in your homeschool. So we want to just let you know that we've struggled kind of like with teaching foreign language in our own homeschool and have some ideas and solutions that would be helpful to you. But before we get started, I just want to let Kat introduce herself and let you know a little bit about her language journey and why she's teaching Spanish online. So, Kat, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Why don't you just let
Hola,
everybody
Lisa.
know, hola, how you got, why you're a foreign language teacher, how you became bilingual, and just tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. So I am Mexican American. My mom is actually from Mexico and she came here back in like Ronald Reagan, time. And so Ronald Reagan gave her citizenship. She has dual citizenship now. So she's a citizen in Mexico and she has a citizenship here. She did the whole process. She went through
Wow.
all of it.
Yeah.
So she has everything and she learned English and all the good stuff. But my mom, I guess I'm going to say, is basically you know, my huge influencer on telling me, no, you're learning your roots, you're learning Spanish. I think that was the biggest influence on my life on why I was so insistent on my own kids. So I have five kiddos. Um, are they fluent? Sadly, not yet. However, they understand it. They
Yeah.
understand it because of so many cognate words. And that was my main reason why I actually jumped over to teaching Spanish. But so it started as, as a kid, and Spanish was my first language. I was born in the US. Spanish was my first language. I didn't learn English until I was way later. And so when I went to school, I told my mom, "Hey, mom, I don't want to talk Spanish. Like my kids, my friends, and all the kids at school, they talk English. I don't need to know Spanish." And so I came with this like, I know better. I don't need Spanish. My mom was so upset. She's like, "No, you're not gonna. You're Mexican. These are your roots. You are going to know Spanish." You may not see the benefit now, but you will, kind of like that kind of at my level, kind of letting me know, like, no, this is good for you. And so I was like, oh, fine, kind of that kid attitude of like, okay, ma, so she did not let it go. She made sure that with family, I spoke Spanish. When we were in Mexico, I spoke Spanish. And when I communicated with my grandparents, it was Spanish. And so I didn't learn it until I was in grade school. I am a public school kid, but I love homeschooling my kiddos, and I decided to actually teach it so that my kids could have more exposure to it. Being that I live in California and LA, you'd think that we have a lot of exposure to the language. Sadly, I feel like it's not as much as when I was a kid
Mhm.
because we've become a bit of a bit Americanized. And so when I was a kid, everywhere we went, it was Spanish. We were in downtown LA, we'd go eating at a restaurant. And so the language in certain areas, are stronger than in others. And so I told my kids, these are your roots. It's so good for you to be bilingual. It's going to open so many doors. And even at my job, I worked at a multi-million dollar company as an HR rep. And so the the atmosphere, they were just more comfortable with someone, and it was usually Hispanic, mainly Hispanic. And so they were very comfortable. I was like the liaison between the big cheeses and the frontline team because they were comfortable. And so when they had a concern, they didn't have to try and find the words of how to communicate their, frustrations or like needing of assistance. They could just say it in their own language.
Mhm.
There wasn't that barrier of, I'm trying to convey to you my struggles. Help me. And how do I do that in a language that's not my own? And
Mhm.
so it's opened so many doors. And mind you, now I'm teaching Spanish. I took it in junior high. So I didn't just, and I taught myself how to read and write actually in Spanish. It wasn't perfect. It was not perfect. That came later because there's little exceptions in the language. But I did it on my own just by already speaking it at home it opened that door to make it easier for me to read and write.
Mhm.
And so I would even translate books. I remember because I love books and I wanted to be an author as a kid. I would translate books from English to Spanish just for fun. And so that's how much I love the language. Now that I think back, like I didn't realize, how much I loved it. I even took a whole year off of going to college and I went to Mexico and I actually taught English to a junior high class, or I think it was a sixth or seventh grade class. And so I was teaching English. It wasn't paid, it was just volunteer. And so I had so much fun with the class. And then now speed up to after junior high, I took Spanish in junior high. I took Spanish in high school, all the way to AP Spanish. So I went all the way. I did amazing on my AP test. And then, I took some courses in college because I like to keep it fresh. And there are changes in the language as far as the rules, just like, anything else. And so then speed up to now being a mom and pulling my kids out of public school. And so I'm like, okay, well, I think we need to like start really taking the language seriously. Let's dive in. Hence me teaching and putting all of my kids in as many classes as I could. I'm like, Mom, I'm taking Spanish 3 times a week. I said, yes, yes, you are. Think of if you were in public school, you would be taking Spanish 5 days a week. So 3 days is not that bad. So, but it makes such a huge difference doing it regularly. I have students that don't do homework and come to class and it shows. It's obvious. It's so hard not to like, well, I know you didn't study or I know you didn't put the time in because it's so obvious. It's like math.
Yeah.
If you don't, if you don't understand the previous and then it starts building, it's hard to keep up, but it's doable. I think students can get really overwhelmed with like, oh, what is this? But the way I like to teach it is I really tie in like, okay, what is this in English? Like, you know, direct object pronouns. Okay, well, what are they? Okay, well, now these are the rules in Spanish. These are the direct object pronouns, and this is how we use them. And then it's like, I feel like once you kind of explain it in the sense of like, okay, well, first I have to understand what they are in English. And then it's kind of like they get a 2 for 1. And I love doing that. Like, I
Yeah.
love teaching culture in my Spanish classes because it and history because it's like a tie-in. Like you get a bunch of all these things for the price of one.
Right,
So
right.
so I
I
love
love
teaching
it.
like Mexican American history because I am Mexican American. But then, like the Cinco de Mayo, people think it's Independence Day. And then I tell my students, oh, what's Cinco de Mayo? Oh, it's Mexico's Independence Day. And I'm like, actually, it's not. And they're like, oh, what? So I love seeing their faces and teaching them things that they didn't know or correcting things that they didn't know. And so I love it all. I love history, so I bring that into my classes. I love books and reading, so we've read a little bit of Don Quixote. So it's just I love it. And I love art, so we'll bring in art into our classes and so I love it all and I hope that my students see my enthusiasm and that kind of rubs off on them a little bit. So yeah.
You are so enthusiastic in class. I love it so much. It's actually like a whole skill set to have that much energy online. So I love that you just bring that to the class. So we've talked about this before, but let's just share again. Do you think it's possible for our kids to learn a second language before they graduate from high school? And why should they, if it's even possible?
Oh, definitely. I have a handful of students that they're in junior high, elementary, even in high school. They're determined. And that's one of
Mhm.
the things I asked them to, from the get-go. The very first class, I asked them, I want to know, why are you learning Spanish? Why
Mhm.
are you in class? Why are you taking it? It could just be, and it's an okay answer, oh, I need high school credit and my
Yeah,
mom wants me to take Spanish. And
yeah,
that's okay. If your answer is the second one where like, I want to be fluent, I want to know. So then I'll, make a little mental note and I can see the difference and I
mhm,
can see the progress. And it all has to do with their effort. If they are like, I want to know, I want to learn, and they like it. I have I have I think she's in third or fourth, no, fourth or fifth grade. And she's like, I want to learn all of the languages. And so she'll ask me questions and she'll do it on her free time. And I hear her mom telling me, like, she so wants to learn Spanish. She's reading books and looking up and using Google Translate. And I was like, oh, don't discourage Google Translate. I always tell them, like, be careful with Google Translate. But, if that's
yeah,
helping her, by
yeah.
all means, let her do that. And so it is totally possible, but it has to do with like everything. It's also like a heart issue. Are you going to do it with wholeheartedly, like for the Lord? Are you just kind of like, I don't really care about this class and I just want to pass? It all has to do with your heart and your how you're coming into your classes. If you
Mhm.
want to be successful, I always tell my students, whether you think you're right, whether you think you can or you can't, you are right. And that
Yeah.
always stuck with me. I had really good teachers in public school. Public school is what it is, and it's different from back in my day. We've gotten amazingly like off track, but that always stuck to me. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So if you
Mhm.
come in with a yes attitude, I can do this, guess what? You're gonna do it. And
Yeah.
so with those students that really want to be fluent, I see it. They're able to. Their goal is to be fluent. They're going to do it
Yeah.
because they're putting in the effort. And I'm always telling them, like, hey, go out there, talk to people. If you're going to order some tacos, go order it in Spanish. If you're going to go order some, like, groceries and they speak Spanish, say it in Espanol. They're not going to make fun. They're not going to laugh. On the contrary, they're going to be like, wow, they're learning my language. I took a whole class to go shopping in the mall. It's like an indoor swap meet. It's all Hispanic, mind you. And my students were so nervous and they're like shaking. And I give them a little like sheet of what to say and what it means and how to we're looking for prom dresses. And so they were so nervous, but all of the ladies and everyone were so nice and so like, wow, like they're learning Spanish. And I've had students tell me, like, Miss Garcia, I'm eavesdropping. I can hear and understand what they're saying. I felt so bad, but they're like, I can understand. And it just gives me so much joy when they come back and tell me, like, yes, I knew what they were saying. And I always tell students, you're going to understand a lot faster than you can put together words. That's okay. It's
Mhm.
it's going to take you a bit more time to be able to have that conversation. Verbs are going to be so important for you and conjugating verbs and like I have them do charts and they're like, "Oh, Miss Garcia, we have to do charts." I said, "Yes, yes, you do." But it's
Well,
so helpful in all
yeah.
these skills. It's skills that they're learning that are going to help them in the future in college courses. I like to see it as it's like a two-part knowledge and skills.
Yeah.
You're learning skills, so many skills, memorization, repetition, grammar,
Mhm.
culture, history. It's like I think students sometimes do them a disservice of not seeing the whole picture,
Mhm.
and so if they see it like come into it like my teachers want me to learn, my teachers are
Mhm.
here for me, my teachers are not gonna like if they see me failing, they're not gonna let me fail. So
Mhm.
I think well, once they see it that way, I think it gives them a peace of mind of like, okay, I need to do my part, and
Yeah.
then the rest of it, my teachers can help me with that.
Yeah.
So definitely possible. It just all
Yeah.
depends on the students and their heart in it.
I love that. And the other thing too, I realized just watching students over the years, once they realize the skills needed to learn a language, it's so much easier.
Exactly.
Like
Oh
memory work
yeah.
is a big part of language
Oh yeah.
acquisition. And we all, when we learn to talk in our native language, we all heard and understood words before we started saying them.
Exactly. I tell my
Yeah.
students that all the time. It's not like
Yeah.
we sat there teaching a 2-year-old grammar.
Right.
They
Right.
just heard us talking. And I
Yeah.
tested that with my 3-year-old, where I would tell her, like, ¿Qué es? What is it? Oh, and she'd answer me in English. It's a cat. She understood what I said. She
Hmm.
didn't
Yeah.
answer me. She didn't answer me in Spanish, but
Uh-huh.
she understood what I said. So when
Yeah.
I said it in Spanish and she knew, I go like this for her to repeat it. And she knows if I do this, I
Uh-huh.
want to hear, and I do this, I want her to say it. And then she forgets. She's like, "Oh, Mama wants me to repeat it," and so she'll say it in Espanol. And
Uh-huh.
so she's like, it's taking us some time,
Yeah.
just because where everything is in English, TV
Yeah.
is in English, even though we try to put it in Spanish. People that
Yeah.
we interact with, it's in English. The streets are in English. Everything is
Yeah.
English. So unless I tell my, I like tell tease my kids, I'm gonna move all you guys to Mexico for like half a year, and you guys are gonna have to speak it. You're not gonna have a choice. And they're like, no, but it's just that immersion. They need that.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
need that immersion where they
Yeah.
have no choice. They have to
Yeah.
speak it in order to communicate and get their what they need or their point across. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Well, and that's a great segue into tools parents can use to help teach a foreign language. Even if
Oh
your kids are
yeah.
in a class, there's some great things that you can do to support that foreign language learning.
Yep.
And one of the things my daughter has done is she has just watched movies. Now, it's not always easy to find movies that are like PG-13 and not like
Yeah,
R-rated.
sadly.
But
Yeah.
one thing Dana Hanley does, who's our German teacher, is she has the kids watch commercials, which I
Mhm.
love because it's usually a focused idea. It's short and they make the point really quickly. So, and it's usually G-rated,
Yeah,
not always, but
exactly.
most of the time.
Yeah.
And they can be very entertaining. And so, commercials, watching commercials in a foreign language, you can find them on YouTube, is a great way to support foreign language learning. Do you have some other ideas? I know you've done some of them on Facebook Lives and stuff like that. But what are some other ideas parents can use?
So definitely, I always tell parents, you know, think of what they like. If they like songs, and play their songs that they like in Spanish. So
Mm,
like Disney songs,
yeah.
there's songs that they know the words to because they've just seen the movies or heard the songs, and then they hear it now in another language. I also read the Bible in Spanish with a lot of my students.
Mm,
Now, there's a dual, like a bilingual, where there's English and Spanish side by side. But if they know these stories in English already, it's not that hard for them to
right.
start connecting the dots and reading it in Spanish.
Mhm,
I so Bible is a big one. I even give my students around like Easter, we start reading John. And
mhm,
so I have them watching a dramatized
mhm.
Bible thing along with reading John. And we read
Yeah.
through all of John for leading up to Easter. And so that's another thing. Putting their favorite shows, whether it's Netflix, Prime, Amazon Prime,
Mhm,
putting it in Spanish and then leaving the subtitles in English.
mhm.
And sometimes, hey, now they're practicing reading, so you get to
Yeah.
knock out that out of the park. I so big time songs, books,
Mhm,
movies that they already know in English, put them in Spanish. Things like that. And definitely, if they're very musical, songs will get stuck
yeah.
in their head.
Yeah.
And then students are like, oh, I don't know how to say that. I'm like, no, no, no. Yes, you do. Because you know what this is and you've heard this song before. What is this? Oh, okay. What is this? Oh, and they're like, oh, I do know how to say that. So it's just, I love seeing those little light bulbs go off.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there are so many things. Using, books is a huge thing. I
Yeah.
mean, going to the library and getting a bunch of books and, and even if you have to start really low, like
Yeah.
I know students feel like they have to run from like beginner learning Spanish to like high school level reading. I said,
Mhm.
we're not there yet. You have to start at the level that you're at, where it feels like you're reading like little kindergarten, first grade books, but that's where
Mhm.
we're at. That's
Yeah.
where that's where you have to go.
Yeah.
So it's just looking at what they like to do and then running with that.
Yeah.
So, mhm.
Yeah, and I love that idea because I think just even doing early readers in a foreign
Uh-huh.
language, because it's going to be simpler syntax and grammar structure, and it
Mhm.
might have some words that the kids already know because we do live in a
Exactly.
culture with a lot of Spanglish in it.
Oh yeah.
Um, the other thing I wanted to mention is apps. We have a really nice self-paced Spanish app that we offer for sale at True North Homeschool Academy. And then obviously classes. There's self-paced classes that are asynchronous. A lot of them are cartoons. They aren't necessarily live people, but then you can also do the live online classes. Tutors, we actually have several people who do tutoring through True North Homeschool Academy for various foreign language classes. And that's a great way. We have a couple people who are really dedicated to being fluent in a second language at some point sooner than later. And so because they're so dedicated, they're hiring tutors. And with a tutor, you get that one-on-one and you can really go a lot farther faster. You already mentioned travel, which is maybe my
Yes.
favorite way.
Yes, definitely. I have a
Yeah,
student that I was so amazed that he's like, I want to be fluent. And so his mom actually purposely, they travel to
yeah,
Spanish speaking countries. And
right.
I love it. They even came back and they sent me this amazing, cute little turtle from Mexico.
I
And
love it.
I was like, oh, thank you.
That
And
is so sweet.
I know. And so they went surfing out there. And so he was so excited to be able to practice the language out there. So
Wow.
definitely travel. If you already traveled, might as well travel and use it, you
Yeah.
know. And then
Yeah,
it's gonna be a little nerve-wracking at first, but once you get over the hurdle of like, oh, you'll be
yeah.
fine. You'll be
Well,
fine.
and I love what you said that people are not going to make fun of you. If even in
Exactly.
America, if you just try to
Yeah.
speak someone's language, they feel
Oh
like that
yeah.
connection. It's not off-putting at all. They feel like you're
Not at
making an
all.
effort to understand something so important because language is so important to us,
So
right?
important. Yeah.
The other thing, this is really super easy and cheesy, but you can just label items around your house in the other language. It's a great way to learn nouns and
Mm-hmm.
it contextualizes things. And I know Usborne books, they have those great like first 100 words in French or Spanish. And that's a great way. They label items around the house. And that's a great way to just learn nouns very simply. Because if you have the word for table, like it's mesa, right? Am I
La mesa.
La Mesa, just put it on your table, just put a little sticker on your table, and then it contextualizes it for the kids. And if they're visual
Mhm.
like me, they can just
Exactly.
like in their mind's eye visualize La Mesa on the table. Then they
Hmm.
have it.
Yeah,
It's super,
exactly.
super easy. The other
Yeah.
thing that is super helpful is to connect with somebody in a different language, a different country, and work together to learn each other's language. Now, Dana Hanley is doing this in the German class where they're connecting with a class in Germany who wants to learn English. Part of the problem that we've run into is that a lot of the foreign uh, language people that we've connected with know English fluently already. So they want to practice
Mm,
their English. But
mm,
you can just set up like we want to do 20 minutes of this and 20 minutes of that or whatever. But that is a super fun way for kids, especially to connect with people around the world. I did an interview with John Connor, who created the Breaking the Barrier class program that we used for the high school level Spanish. And he said something interesting. He said it connects you with people around the world if you know their language because you understand their heart. Like our first language is the language of our heart, usually. And so if you can connect with somebody on that level, it's an automatic friendship, usually, you know what I mean?
mhm,
And I just love that. But the other thing he said that I've said so many times since then, because I loved it so much, was that learning a second language builds your confidence and teaches you humility at the same time. And I think that's really true because you're learning skills, so you're gaining confidence. Like you know some vocabulary, you know how to put it together, like you're communicating with people who are not from where you are usually, but also you're probably making a lot of mistakes. So
yeah.
yeah,
Keeps
it's
you
an
humble.
interesting, there's a lot of soft
Yeah.
skills in that, right? Like
Oh yeah.
creativity, communication, critical thinking,
Hmm.
collaboration, because if you're making mistakes, usually this has been some of my kids' experience when they've tried to communicate in a second language, that person will say, no, no, it's like this, not that. And so you have that
Exactly.
automatic teamwork connection
Yep.
going on, which is really
Hmm.
sweet. Like all of a sudden they have this connection with a new friend that they would have never had if they hadn't just tried.
Exactly.
So it's a courage thing too. Like
Oh
your
yeah.
kids are building courage by doing that. Um, yeah. So there's so many great lessons to learning a second language. We I think some of the other tools that are really common are Duolingo. There's so many apps right now. Manga, the one that we use, which is Recess on Recess. There's self-paced classes, and they're all really good. So one of the things, and I don't know that Spanish is considered a critical language. I thought I saw it on the list, but a critical language are those foreign languages that are really important to diplomacy, trade, or defense. And Spanish, because I think it's just always on the list, even though it's not difficult to learn generally for most English speakers, because it's in the Romance family, and we have that kind of idea in our mind generally. But it's a great language to learn because we're bordered by a Spanish speaking country. And more people in the world speak Spanish than English, which
Hmm.
I don't think people like connect that, but there's so many Spanish speakers in the world. So there's just so many great reasons to learn Spanish for sure. Um, yeah, anything else you want to add to that? So I'm just kind of talking now.
No, I've loved self-paced the our Risas y Sonrisas. I am very musical, so I'm very classical. So I love the hand motions and the
Yes.
songs, and so the nice thing about self-paced, again, I like, the more I can cover, the better.
Yeah.
So aside from the song, they also teach me ASL. So
Yeah.
with it, they learn the ASL with it, and they're there's games in there, and there's now they have comics and they have
Yeah,
videos, and so it's just it's nice. And the students that use it, they really like it, and
yeah.
so it's nice.
I love how we're utilizing the app with a live class. We've done that with several of our classes with math too. With the Recess Day Sunrises, they get the Spanish, they get the ASL, and they get a live teacher. And it's such a winning combo. The other thing about the self-paced Spanish is they have scripts for the kids to memorize.
Hmm.
And that might seem like really rote and rigid, but one of the things about memorizing a script in a foreign language is your kids are learning so much grammar and contextualization. It is such a great tool for learning a second language. Don't you think? I mean, I
Oh
love that
yeah.
part of it.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. My students are like, Miss Gracie, I have to memorize all this. And I said, you'll be fine. We're just gonna practice it. Once you start repeating it over and over, and you take some time during your week, hopefully to listen to it, the script, because now they can watch it and see it
yeah,
and follow along. It's just
yeah,
exposure. You can't
yeah,
expect yourself once you hear it one time and you're like, oh, it has to be cemented in my brain. No,
yeah,
it's gonna take us a few times.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's such a great program. I love it so much. So we use that for the Spanish A and B at True North Homeschool Academy, as well as the once a week live online with Kat. So Magistrate Garcia is the teacher for both A and B. And then we have a new program this year that
Yay.
is Spanish 1A. So tell us about that.
So I saw from our class from last year, and I saw how they were like right there, either almost ready for Spanish one, or ready for Spanish one. It's just their age. They weren't quite there yet. They're a
Yeah,
little on the younger side. And so I was really like, oh, maybe we should just have a junior high class. And I'd love to have them in there. And then, we can pop them into Spanish one or two. And then so we started thinking like, why don't I just help them get credit early for high
yeah,
school? And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. So if they take 1A this year and then they take 1B next year, that'll give them a full credit. They'll be able to have one credit for Spanish one. They can automatically now, right after those 2 years, go into Spanish two straight in there, and they'll be
I love
ready.
it.
And so I think it'll be great. I'm super excited for the students this year.
I love it. And it does all of the work of Spanish 1. It just slows it down.
Yes.
And I like that because it's really good for kids who maybe they're a little bit older and they're not ready for the full, pace of a high school class, or they're doing Latin at the same time. We have a lot of students who are taking Latin and a modern foreign language at True North, which is completely doable. And honestly, they support each other in so many ways.
Oh,
I know there's
definitely.
two schools of thought on that in the philology world, but but that's probably
Yes.
for a different discussion. It's
Yeah.
beyond my pay grade.
Yeah. So definitely, they start seeing those. I'm always like, okay, who's taking Latin?
Yeah.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah.
It's like you have a little bit of a like head start on
Yeah. Yeah.
on your class. So definitely opens that door to like, oh, there's gender and number in Spanish too. Oh, now we have endings too. And like
Yeah.
you start seeing like ding ding ding. So
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, Latin students do really, really well.
Yeah, and they generally love Spanish. After I
Mm.
taught Latin for a couple of years, we were in Texas and we were at an old Spanish mission, and I was able to read all the placards in Spanish and totally understand them without really. I haven't done any Spanish really since like junior high myself, so that was
Mm,
pretty exciting. So they
yeah.
do go along really, really well.
Oh, yes. And all those cognates, I tell them cognates are your best friend. What
Yeah,
does this word say? Oh, it says doctor. Well, we're in Espanol, so what does it say? Doctor. Oh, what is that? You know what that is.
yeah,
Doctor. It's spelled exactly the same. So
yeah.
I'm like, their cognate words are your best friend.
Yeah, I love it. So the Spanish 1A is on sale right now. We're doing a flash sale. You can use the code JR30 to get 30% off, which is we've never done this before. We also have Latin 1 for 30% off and use the same code JR30. We've never ever put Latin on sale before because it's a bestseller. But we just want people in the foreign language classes because it's going to really help them really succeed. Our kids are going to work and live in a global gig economy, and we want to give them the tools that they're going to need to really be able to manage that that well. We're also offering ancient Roman studies, which is NLE test prep, but we turn it into a full year credit, a full year class for credit. And that's on sale too for JR30. So the other thing too, biblical and modern Hebrew, both 1 and 2 are on sale right now for 50% off. And we have never, ever, ever had live online classes for 50% off. And you can use coupon code FLASH50. And all those sales are good until June 28th. So if you're interested in that junior high Spanish class, go grab it now. We are offering 3 high school Spanish 1 classes, 2 Spanish 2 classes, and Spanish 3 and Spanish 4. Spanish 1, usually all of our sections are packed full. So I would expect the same this year. So if you guys have a certain day and time or teacher that you want, both Pat Garcia and Monica Quintana are going to be teaching Spanish 1 and Spanish 2. So make sure you order them earlier than later if you have a certain day and time that you want. Otherwise, we can't guarantee that.
And hey, we have honors if your students are right there. We have that Spanish 1 honors class that I'm gonna just up it a little bit just to give them a bit of a more challenging class.
Yeah. So where do they go from Spanish 1 honors? They just go to Spanish 2?
Yes, it'll just give them the honors on their transcript.
Yeah, which is weighted a little bit differently.
Yes.
So it's great. It looks great on the transcript. If they're applying for a competitive program, it's going to give them that little bit more oomph on their transcript. So excited about that.
Yeah.
And this is the first time we've offered Spanish honors. So the other thing too, we do in all the foreign language classes, which I love so much, is the kids always do cultural study projects. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that? People might be interested in that because I think it just really rounds out language learning.
Yeah, so in every lesson, it's always linked to a country. So our first country right off the bat, lesson 1 is Mexico. And so I had them they had to find a person that's Mexican, and they had to research the person. And then very simple, I told them, very simple. His name is blah, blah, blah. And so not only are they learning a bit of some of the people from there, whether it's an artist or an actor or someone from the revolution of the Mexican War, and so they'll do a presentation on this famous person. Then we move on to now they're making meals, and then it's just I love the culture, and they're watching a video on Mexican American War and what is Cinco de Mayo, when is Independence Day. So we do that in September because that's when Mexico's independence is. And so their projects are very much culture based. And so like the last project that they did, well, actually second to last, they did a meal. And I was so surprised that a lot of students were like, oh, we get to cook a meal? And I was like, oh, yay. So they make a menu and they research that country, or they research a meal and of whatever country they chose. And so they had to cook it and use Preterite to tell me what they did to make the meal. And someone had to take pictures. They created a really nice slide, for presentation for it. And, the meals that they made, I was pretty surprised. Some people made horchata, some people made huge, like a whole entree of food. And I was like, wow. Some really got into it. That's what I love. I love getting to where I'm hugely project based. Worksheets are awesome and grammar is awesome, but giving them those culture projects and giving them that project based assignments, I love it because it's like now those more, because I'm pretty creative and I'm like, oh, worksheets, okay, fine, and then I'm like, okay, give me the fun stuff. Give me the fun stuff. I want to do fun stuff. So I like to give them those creative things where they can shine for those students that just like being creative, and they can make their slides all nice and pretty and take pictures, and so I love just giving them those culture projects where they actually get to research that country or that biography on that person, really dive in and okay, now let's put in Spanish. How do we say that? So yeah.
I love it. I love it. And it just makes the world bigger and smaller at the same time.
Oh, definitely.
I love that part of it. I love it when our kids realize that people are people around the world and they're just like them in so many ways. And yet the cultures are so different, and how they're raised makes such a difference in their ideas about the world and life and all that kind of stuff. So I love the culture projects. Okay, super cool. So you are teaching Spanish A and B. So really like from first grade, first to third is Spanish A, 4th to 6th is Spanish B. Is that how you would probably?
A is about 4th through 5th.
Okay.
B is about 5th through 6th. So it's like
Okay.
right before junior high. And then we have our junior high classes.
Yeah.
And then from there we have our high school Spanish 1 through 4.
Yeah. Awesome. And if your kids are too young for Spanish A, get the self-paced Spanish because it's
Yes.
awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Anything else you want people to know about learning a language?
Just be open.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about, like I said, it's all about how you come into the language, if you're how open you are to learning it, and put the time into it. Time into
Yeah.
it is so important.
Yeah.
And ask for help. If
Yeah.
your teachers don't know you're struggling, although we can kind of tell from homework, but
Yeah.
if don't be shy to reach out to your teachers if you need more clarification, or it's just it's so important for us. Ask for help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely ask for help.
Yeah. So there's a question in the chat. We have a student who has 1.5 credits in Spanish, but they need 2 total. So they were
Okay.
thinking of the honors option. Would that be a
Okay.
good place to start?
So they took Spanish, was it like Spanish 1? It was Spanish 1,
I think so.
or they just took Spanish.
Maybe she'll type it in the chat.
Okay.
If it was Spanish 1, could they go to Spanish 2? What do you think?
I would, yes. It might be a little redundant, it might be a little boring. Although if they were struggling
Mhm.
pretty,
Yeah.
extensively in Spanish 1, it might be a good idea to go into Spanish 1 honors if
Yeah.
they're, and then, but then they need to, if they need 2 credits, then they
Mhm.
might have to take Spanish 2. So it all depends on your journey and what you want to do as far as, want to do Spanish 1 honors and then give them Spanish 2 for the following year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it
Well,
kind of
and
all
you
depends.
can, yeah. One of the things you could do is if they have 1.5 credits and they've done Spanish 1, is have them jump into Spanish 2 and do a half a year of Spanish 2. And then you have the two full credits of foreign language learning. But you can directly message us later and we can help you sort all that out. Where would be a good place? We do have people all the time who are like, my kids have done some Spanish or some German or some ASL. Where do they fall into your program? And excuse me. When we get those kind of questions, I direct those to the actual foreign language teachers so that they can interact directly with you and kind of see where your kids are at and let you know where they'd be placed best. So if you have questions like that, feel free to send us a private message or email us. The email's on the website, and we'd love to help you get a good placement for our program. And the kids and all of the classes have workbooks and worksheets and all that kind of stuff. They also have some awesome projects, and the kids get to interact with each other. And one of the things we really work on our foreign language classes is that the kids hear the language and speak the language at the same time, because you can do a workbook on your own at home. You don't really need to pay for a class for that, but we want them to have interactive lessons with people who understand the language and love it, because that's exciting. Once you're interacting with somebody who gets it and knows how to teach it, all of a sudden it's like really doable. And we want your kids to get really excited about learning the language and fall in love with it and succeed with it. So that's what we offer.
Yeah, so we do have breakout rooms where I have them one-on-one, and then I'll kind of hop into the classrooms and, okay, how are we doing? And
Yeah.
so, like, and I always encourage my students, help each other out. If
Yeah.
your, fellow classmate is struggling with pronouncing one of the words or doesn't know what to say next, help each other out. We're in it together.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Kat, thanks for being here today. You guys, thanks for
Thank you
joining
for
us.
having me.
If you have any questions about foreign language learning or Spanish in particular, we'd love to answer them for you. And have a great day, everybody.
Thanks. Gracias.
Bye, everybody.